Hey there, it's Christian from 7 Gaming Network, and today I have got a review for you, and this is for something eagerly anticipated for me. This is Hybris, Disordered Cosmos, which is essentially a passion project, I would say, by one person in particular with a small team around him. And I have to say, this is eagerly anticipated for me because there's a lot about it that caught my eye. The art being certainly one of the things. But this could end up constituting the Greek mythology meets steampunk heavy Euro worker placement game that you never knew you needed. This is a game for 2 to 4 players, although it was a Kickstarter only project, and there was some Kickstarter stretch goals that meant you also get a solo and co-op mode as part of the package. So as usual, I'm going to give you a review of the components in the game, and then I'll go over gameplay, what I liked, what I didn't, what sort of game groups might enjoy this one, so that you can make a decision whether this is going to be a game to add to your collection or not. Now, components. Guys, this is another extraordinary Kickstarter. The quality of components in this project it's stellar. It is right up there with some of the very best that I have ever seen. Now, they aren't perfect, and I'll talk about that, but my goodness, they are glorious. We've got game trays, we've got big, thick cardboard stock everywhere for dual layered player boards covered in fantastic vibrant art. We've got cards of all sorts of different shapes and sizes with, again, just wall-to-wall beautiful art on it. We've got completely gorgeous minis. I mean, really spectacular minis in this game. Little component for resources. We've got meeples, screen printed meeples. Everywhere you look in this game, there is quality of components. It's dripping with quality throughout. Now, I am a sucker for art, as many of you will know, and this is one of the standout features of Hybris. Now, it's got this, if I say it out loud, it sounds weird, because we've got this kind of, it's anime manga that mixed with a sort of classical elements of art, but also then with this very unusual kind of steampunk feel going on with it, almost cyberpunk in some elements. Now, when I say that out loud, that sounds like that. None of that should go together. But they have done a wonderful, fabulous job of curating all of this art to bring it together. So it is very cohesive. It does feel all like very much part of the same mindset and the same approach to the art. And my goodness, it works. The art in this is spectacular. I could go on about the art all day, but all the components here are just wonderful. The dual layered player boards, which are kind of the center of an individual player's experience, of course. Now, there's something very special about this. They have a set of unlock tiles on there, not dissimilar to Cthulhu Wars or Glorantha, in terms of they have 6 unlocks that then give you new abilities. But what's really lovely about this is the dual layered player boards create the space then for them to have the tiles literally be tiles that are flipped. They're enhancement tiles, and they fill the art out and the background picture very nicely as you unlock them, which is great. But even the individual tiles have components within them that, through the various game effects, you'll be unlocking. And as you take these components out, they are used in the board, they're put into places, they're new workers to deploy, they're temples that you add to the board, and so on. So as you're developing your board state, you are unlocking these new enhancement tiles, and you flip them over, and there's something wonderfully tactile about the whole experience. This has been one of my favourite hands-on games that I've ever played. because the joy of having a good turn where you are pulling a whole bunch of things out of your board and then flipping tiles over, and having more things now as having advanced your game state, the whole tactile experience of this is something that it doesn't get old. Now you can tell that this is a game where no corners were cut on the quality of the components that they put in here, but it doesn't mean that they are perfect. And I think most of the problems that we see in the game are largely due to the fact that it's this gigantic, I mean, it's a huge game. It is a massive scope game with all the expansions in, of which there are several. You have got so much content in this game, and for a relatively small team to just sort of QA all of that, some things have got through, and it's mostly some typos, it's mostly some misprints, it's some translation issues. It's a French studio that's created the game, and so certainly as a person playing it in English, there's a couple of occasions, mostly in expansions. The core box is definitely better than the expansions, but there's a few rather strange turn of phrases used and things like that. And so whilst those are annoying and they impact gameplay in a very minor fashion, although I will mention that a bit more in the gameplay review, I think the biggest misfire, such as it is that the game trays for this one are only good instead of really good, because mostly game trays knock it out of the park. For instance, a couple of the compartments they seem to be not quite the right size for the components. Now this is in the trays that you use to hold all of your god's components in. Now everything fits, but some of it's just a bit big for some of the pieces. And then probably the worst bit is that the section where they put in cards, they're a bit small. Now you can put sleeved cards in, you really can, and it won't affect the cards themselves, but you'll probably find that because it's a really snug fit, you might end up just sort of dog-earing the sleeves that you use a bit. It just didn't need to be quite so snug. I just felt like they perhaps could have had another iteration or two working in conjunction with game trays to refine these a little bit more. So in a game that is wall-to-wall glorious quality and beautifully done, there's just a couple of things that are kind of QA, just needed a bit more time put into it. Now these are things that I think will all get ironed out, of course, when it comes to a second Kickstarter, of which this is almost undoubtedly going to get, and so they're probably only going to be a problem for you if you end up coming by and getting your hands on one of these first edition Kickstarter kits. So overall, despite a couple of small misfires, largely I think due to the scope of the game and the relatively small team that's trying to produce it, the quality of components in this, they're as good as they get in terms of their quality. And I found myself just setting the game up and just enjoying the tactile experience of that. I found myself wandering over to my game as it's set up on the table, waiting for me to return to it when I can play it properly, and I've just found myself gazing at the wonderful art. This is a piece of art to own. Okay, so gameplay review coming up. Let me talk about things I really love about this game. There are a great many things to say that are brilliant about Hybris and its gameplay. Let's talk about combat. Combat in games like this, well, you don't normally find combat necessarily in a Euro, and how they do it in this is a card system that you're essentially playing out a little bit like Tainted Grail, if you've seen that system, where you're attempting to form combos by linking various similar types of cards together, and those cards will have their own individual effects, but again you have this feel of even the one-upmanship of trying to outdo each other in the PvP style combat. And what's crucially important, I think, about it in terms of overall enjoyment of this system is that when two gods are fighting, It's pretty much equally as interesting and fun to be a witness watching two players go through that combat as it is to be one of the gods in that combat. I've mentioned some of the gameplay in the components review around the player board, but I really do want to highlight this because one of the things that's really fascinating is the order of unlocks that you choose to go for in terms of strategically playing the game. They make a massive difference. Your first unlock is going to give you a new ability, and so the order that you choose to start unlocking these abilities has a really big impact on the strategy that you're choosing to do, on what workers you're going to place where, and so on and so forth. And one of the real pleasures in this game for me has been in the replayability, in being able to try and prosecute a different strategy. Let's see what happens when I unlock this one followed by this one. Where in the next game I might go, well, what happens if I unlock that one first and then I think about one of those two next? You might think that something like that shouldn't have such a big impact, but it really does. And that's actually one of the real boons, I think, both for interest in how your current game is working out, but also then for that real, man, I want to play again with this god and see what else I can do with it and how I might prosecute a different strategy. Unusually for Euro games, but actually it's more of a trend that we see in more modern Euro games, player interaction in this one, I would say, is actually quite high. It's really important, I would argue, if you're going to play this well, that you pay attention to what unlocks your opponents are doing, what new abilities are they gaining, what powerful technologies are they deploying to the board that's giving them new abilities, and things like, are they keeping back certain workers, maybe some of their warrior workers, so that they can try and challenge you when you put your technology down on the board. All of this is information that is affecting the decisions that you're going to make. Like I said, this is a game with rich decision space. There's plenty of things that you can take into account when it comes to making a decision to make a play. And actually all of this again feeds into partly that theme of the gods always watching what the others are doing and then trying to get that one-upmanship on the go. Not only is it fun thematically, but it makes for a really engrossing experience, because the more you can pay attention to what everybody else is doing on their turns, which move generally very quickly, the more you have an understanding of everything that's going on, it will allow you to play this game better. I think the skill cap with this game is really quite high. Now that means that there is an element of take that in this game, most definitely, although it's mostly indirect, apart from perhaps when a player challenges another player when they're playing out one of their technologies. Generally, when you play a technology out, you're going to get 3 different rewards, and if a player successfully challenges another player, they get to pick one of those 3 rewards. So actually it still absolutely makes sense to go and play those technologies out, although it can be a little bit frustrating to lose one of those boons that you've just worked hard to get, albeit by someone else using up their resources to come and challenge you for it. So take that as here, but it's mostly in the form of indirect plays. I mentioned it, that it's important that you're watching what other players are doing, and that's largely going to cause you to have to deal with what they are doing in terms of your own strategy. Now, some people love it when an opponent can throw a spanner in the works of their plans, and it's part of the tactical joy of being able to adjust your plans on the fly, adjust your strategy, and then still prosecute it to get that victory or that win. However, for those of us who don't enjoy that and prefer Euro games where we can do our thing without getting the frustration of having to adjust it because of what someone else is doing on the board, maybe this game is going to wind you up. It might not be one for you, because that's at the heart of the gameplay, as it is at the heart of the theme of this. the gods didn't just leave each other alone. They were always interfering with each other in these marvellous mythologies. And that's really captured very well in this game. And so in terms of the gameplay, you want to be aware of that. This is a game with take that, bit of direct and lots of indirect. So unlocks and enhancements and getting more workers and more things happening and building resources and deploying technologies. And there are times when I had many great moments where I'd just sort of sit back from a turn and I'd go, wow, I just did loads. I unlocked this and I moved that onto the board, and then I got these 2 cards and that allowed me to complete this one, and I scored this many victory points, and wow, I just really advanced my board state. There are many moments of that real satisfaction of just having done a great deal. Now I have to mention the expansions because they really add so much. The sort of co-op solo player expansion really is, quite frankly, probably the best solo experience that I've had in recent years. I'm not much of a solo gamer, but I really enjoyed this version. It adds in a whole new god, Kronos, that you are fighting against, and it has this beautiful board. Again, the components are really excellent for this one. But what's great about it is it doesn't feel like you are doing things massively different with your god to that which you would do in gameplay wise to that which you would do in a normal multiplayer game. However, what Kronos is doing is giving you all of these little puzzles, little problems, little challenges to try and overcome all the time, several every turn, and the difficulty really does ramp up. It's got a really nice curve to it, I have experienced in the couple of solo games that I've played with this, with different gods. And so overall I think the solo experience is one that I could see hardcore solo players being really quite comfortable with getting the core game plus the stretch goals expansion box, which is the one that has the solo / co-op expansion gear in, and really enjoying themselves just with that. But apart from all the expansion gods, which are fascinating and brilliantly replayable to explore their different strategies, I have to mention what is the crowning glory of the expansions for me, and that is the Cataclysm expansion. Now look, this Cataclysm expansion, it is bonkers. There's no other real way to describe it. It really is. It's extravagant in what it is trying to do in terms of adding to this already big, rich, deep, heavy experience that you get just in the core game. Cataclysm adds a new location onto the board where you can send workers to, and they essentially become explorers, and you can send them off on expeditions into the outer limits where they can do these expeditions to bring back rich rewards and resources to you as the god, or to deal with challenging events that also basically give you some nice rewards along the way. It also introduces chaos. Chaos as a force that's fighting back essentially and can even destroy parts of the board. It can destroy the city of Athens or Lemnos or whatever it may be. But the coolest and probably most bonkers bit about this expansion is the steampunk / cyberpunk battle mech suits, they call MK suits, that your avatar can wear. I kid you not. What's so cool about these MK suits is that you unlock aspects of them which then gives you resources, essentially just through playing the game as you normally would do anyway. So they're a really easy addition to add in because you're going to play the game and you're going to start getting these extra rewards and resources as a result of what you'd normally be doing. And how you use these resources is really to leverage some very powerful abilities that each god has with their own MK suit. And what's really clever is that I would say that the powers that they've put onto these MK suits that you get to power up and energize and then use in your turns, these powers really do distill the strategies that are available to each of the gods. in essence, it's like they've taken the heart and soul of the strategies that are available to each of the different gods, and then given them an ability that really characterizes that advantage. And so it feels really cool that you can kind of almost manifest the power of Aphrodite in her just controlling all of the prayers in the game, making lots of people love her, and then drain all the prayers out the well so that the other gods can't have any. That's really cool. The god of war, Ares, when he uses his ability, he can basically just bump everybody else out of an area and totally take over the area himself and gain all the bonuses in that area. It just feels so great big stompy Ares to do that. And that's what's really fun about these MK suits. So what are the potential negatives then? Well, this is a long, heavy game, guys. I have been playing a number of 3-player games of this, and they've been about the 3-hour mark each time, maybe just a little bit over. And so I would say that you probably are looking at about an hour per person when you come to playing this. Now, I have run a 4-player game in about 3 hours. That was with me running it and really driving things along. So it's possible that maybe if you really know the game and you're talking about playing the core box experience, then you're probably looking about maybe 45-50 minutes when you all really know what you're doing and you're snappy with your decision making. But there's no two ways about it. This is going to be a longer game. If you add in a Cataclysm expansion or something like that, then you're probably more likely looking at a 4-hour game for 3 of you. Now, having played it solo, 2-player, 3 and 4, I've played it at all the levels you can play it at, I think 3 players feels like a sweet spot, largely because you've got lots of great competition in having 2 other players, which adds to the richness of the experience, but it doesn't go on for too long. With 4 players, everybody needs to play very, very quickly, and I love the core box game experience, but I really do appreciate being able to add in the expansion stuff to this. And I think once you add in something like Cataclysm, that really pushes it beyond the realms of it being able to be 4-player. 3-player is fine, and 2-player is really nice as well when it comes to adding in something like Cataclysm and really making it that kind of deeper, even richer experience. So that's something you have to take into account, that this is going to be a longer game and you're going to be doing a lot of thinking in that. Thankfully, the downtime is really quite minimal. There's very little time when you aren't needing to pay attention to what everyone else is doing, and of course the longest times when it's not going to be your turn and when people are having a combat, and as I already said, PvP is actually a real joy to watch and see what happens. The teach on this one is a bit of a bear too, and so unless you're really experienced and very confident in explaining games and breaking down a game for people to be able to understand, you're going to have to put aside a considerable amount of time for this one. Now, despite Paul Grogan's involvement in the experience, he of Gaming Rules, there still is quite a substantial FAQ and errata being developed for this game and worked on as we speak, because there are some issues with some of the rules, and I think most of it again comes down to those translation issues and the challenges of such a big game with a small team producing it. However, they're there, and there have been quite a few times I've needed to jump into the manufacturers or the designers Discord channel and actually ask some questions. They're great, they're very quick at replying, but at the moment there is still a fair few little ends that need to be tied up on quite a few rules, and so I would say again this is probably stuff that's going to be all ironed out for the next Kickstarter, but right at the moment that is something to take into account if you're thinking of purchasing this one. So overall, Hybris is currently my definition of a flawed masterpiece. It is compelling, it is engaging, it stays with you after you've played it, whether that's mulling over the decisions that you made in a previous game, or whether you're excitedly working out new strategies for that same god or a different god in your next game. This is a game that the two fronts of the glorious tactile experience, the sheer aesthetic enjoyment that comes with a wonderful quality production, some of the very highest I've ever enjoyed, along with this deep, rich, very textured gameplay with huge decision space involved. Those two things married with the glorious theme that fits into all of it, it has really risen up the ranks to become what is at the moment my very favourite Euro worker placement style game. If I only have a short time, then Agricola will be hitting the table. That's my perennial favourite in this area. But if I can get one or two friends and we can sit down for 3 hours, it's going to be Hybris is what I'm going to be pushing for. Now I know that's only going to be for perhaps some of the most hardcore, most experienced gamers in my various gaming groups that's going to work for, but it rewards the investment because there is so much sophistication and nuance to the gameplay in Hybris. And every time I've played it, I have essentially sat there with a pretty silly grin on my face throughout all of it, enjoying the aesthetics and the gameplay, and each time I finish I just want to play again, to try a new god, to try a new strategy, and just get back into the world of Hybris. I really hope you enjoyed this content, guys. If you did, please click like, please click subscribe. There's going to be more content like this coming out. There's a whole bunch of Kickstarters winging their way to me over these next weeks and months. But of course, until next time, as always, keep enjoying your gaming.